Hi there, welcome to the Dovetail Academy. Today I'll walk you through a couple of examples to introduce you to our integration platform. Let's dive right in. The demo examples use an open data source with information about countries. To access this information, we need to send an HTTP request to the API. Here in the Flow Designer, we can see an integration that does exactly that. It retrieves the data for a specific country, translates the result, and sends it back to the user. When the flow is active, messages are being sent between the components. A message consists out of a body, headers, and properties. When you use the analogy of a letter, the body, also called a payload, is the letter itself, whereas the headers and properties are metadata that you can find on the envelope, for instance an address or a stamp, validating access to the service. Messages in Dovetail can move from left to right, which is called one way, or they can move from left to right and back again, which is called request reply. When we look at this flow at a higher level, you can see that it starts with an inbound HTTPS component. This acts as a web service, listening for incoming requests. The filter then authenticates this request. We set up and execute the HTTP call. We remove all of the response headers since we won't be needing them anymore. We convert the response JSON body to XML. With XPath in the set headers, we retrieve data from this XML. The content router is used to verify the completeness of the data, and then we construct a response body accordingly. Let's start this flow by following the link in the notes. And as you can see, here we get the country information for the Netherlands with its capital city Amsterdam. Up here in the URL, you can see that we are sending two parameters along, an API key parameter and a country parameter. If I change this ISO code, for instance to the one for Germany, you can see that we retrieve the information for Germany. There are a couple of ways to inform yourself how this flow is functioning. First of all, the flow is completely annotated. All of the components have a note describing what they do. Hover over a component to see a preview of the note. Additionally, you can click the node icon to see a full component note. Double-click a component or click on the cogwheel to see how it's configured. And lastly, click on the eye icon to go to the Academy page for a component and see all its configuration options and examples. Can you figure out how this flow functions? Feel free to pause the video as I'll be explaining it in detail right now. Following the link in the notes initiates this flow by sending an HTTP request to the inbound HTTPS component. Here in the bottom you can see the URL where this flow can be accessed. As shown before, we are sending two parameters along, an API key parameter and a country parameter. Parameters enter Dovetail as headers. The filter component verifies the API key header against a flow property named flow key. Flow properties are defined in the flow settings. Here you can see that we have two user-defined flow properties, flow key and URL. The other one's always there, this default metadata. This filtration serves as an additional layer of security, allowing only incoming messages with the correct API key to pass through the filter component. Next, a JSON body containing an S-country ISO code key with the value specified in the country header is constructed in the setBody component, in accordance with the API documentation. The setHeader component sets the content type header as required by the API, and additionally a header named endpoint is set for later use. The HTTP component handles the API call. It sends a POST request to the specified URL and waits for the API to respond. The URL is constructed from the flow property named URL, appended with the value of the endpoint header we just set. The remove headers component removes all the headers from the response message. Since they are no longer needed, cleaning them up is considered good practice. The asterisk here is a wildcard, which means that all of the headers will be removed. The JSON to XML component then converts the message body from JSON to XML, and subsequently XPath expressions in the setHeaders component extract data from the XML body and sets it onto two headers, named capital city and country name. The content router verifies the capital city header. If it's not empty, the top route is followed. Otherwise, the flow proceeds along the bottom route. The setBody component in the top and bottom route is used to construct the message body that is returned to the inbound request. In the top route, the body is in XML, where the values of the capital city and country name headers are inserted into their respective XML elements. If the capital city header is empty, the body in the bottom route is constructed, with plain text saying capital city is empty. And finally, the message is logged to the Flow Manager using the log component. We will cover the Flow Manager in more detail in the next example. Because all the components with an exchange pattern option are configured as request reply, the state of the message after the last component is returned to the inbound request. In this example, the message after the log component is the response to the HTTP request that initiated this flow. That was the first example. In the second example, we'll be looking more in detail for the Flow Designer. And that's why you see this XML as response when you trigger this flow. In the second example, we will dive into the Flow Manager and show you how you can use it for debugging or verifying the performance of your flows. In this example, we are interested in the flags of countries. The setup for the first HTTP call is identical to the flow in the first example. I'll quickly explain you how it functions. It starts with an inbound HTTPS component waiting for incoming requests again. Then the filter component verifies the API key. We construct a body again to get the data for a specific country. We set the content type header as specified by the API and an endpoint header for later use. And we execute the HTTP call. We remove all the response headers again. Good practice when you don't need them anymore. And then we convert the JSON response body to XML. We use XPath again, but this time we are looking for a URL in the data that's on the S country flag element. And we put it on the handle named flag URL. This header is used in the second HTTP component to request the flag image. The headers are removed again, and the message is logged into the Flow Manager. Let's use the link in the notes to kick off this flow. And there you go, the flag of the Netherlands. Just like in the first example, if we change the ISO code here, we get the flag for Germany. Now let's navigate back to Dovetail and look into the Flow Managers to see what actually happened. The Flow Manager shows an overview of all the flows within your tenant. You can select to show only the installed flows or all the flows within your tenant. The table below shows all kinds of interesting metrics like uptime, completed pending or failed exchanges, or the version of your flow. To see the data for a specific flow, simply click on it. As you can see, the Stats tab shows some more information about this flow, like the status, whether tracing is configured, and the transport type. For this case, we are interested in the transactions. The transactions are like a step-by-step status of the message in your flow. Here you can see the inbound HTTP component. And as you can see, we receive the API key header, and a bit further down below, the country header. Then we go through the filter component and the set body. Well, hey, there's no body to be found here. That's because the status of the message is always shown as it enters a component. So here on the set headers component, you can see that we actually created the body to post to the API. We define some more headers like the content type, and then we do the HTTP requests. And here you can see the response from the API. We can prettify the data for readability. In this case, we are interested in this country flag header. But first, since we don't need all the other headers anymore, we remove them. And as you can see down below, we just have a very select set of basic Dovetail headers left. We convert the data to XML. And in the set headers component, we were retrieving the flag URL, which is right here. And we put it on a flag URL header. And then we use the second HTTP component to get this flag, and it's represented in Dovetail as binary content. We remove the headers again, and we log the results to the flow manager. This log can be found right here. And here you can see the binary representation of the flag. And if we look at the other one, you can see that we did it for Germany. And when we look at the logs, you can see a binary representation of the flag here. So that's how you use the flow manager to see your message in detail. It's very useful for debugging your flows. In the third example, we will show you how to get segments of data out of the message body for individual processing. In this case, we are interested in the languages of a country. Like in the first two examples, the setup for the HTTP call is identical. We transform the JSON body to XML again, but in this case, we use the split component to split each languages element that we find in the data and send it out to the bottom route of the split component. We then grab the language name from the data using an XPath expression again. We construct a little XML with the value of the language inside, and we convert this XML back to JSON. Because the split component has aggregation set to JSON, this means that each valid JSON at the end of the route right here will be aggregated into one data set out of the right output of the split. Let's see what happens when we kick off this flow. As you can see, for the Netherlands, we get an array with two languages, Frisian and Dutch. And again, if we change this ISO code, for instance, to DE, we get the language for Germany, which is only one language, German. Let's head back to Dovetail and see how this flow functions. There's a shortcut to go to the details of a specific flow, which is right here. And we head into the transactions. Here you can see the inbound call again, with the API key, country header. We do the HTTP call, we get a response, and we convert the response to XML. And here the split component will be splitting this XML on each languages element that it finds. So here you can see the first languages element. We put the language on a header. We construct this XML body, which is converted to a JSON. And here we see the second language element that's splitted out of the bottom. And we do exactly the same. We put it on a header. We construct a little XML body. And we convert it to a JSON. And this log component, the last one is the log component on the right-hand side of the split. And here you can see the aggregated JSON with the two keys for the Frisian and the Dutch language. And if we compare this to the German one, here's the data before the split component again. As you can see, here there's only one language element, so there's only one bottom route, the languages element. Body is constructed with German. It's converted to JSON. And this is what comes out of the right side of the split. So that's how you split data out of the message body for separate processing.